Welcome back to another video. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take our First John website and we're going to improve upon it. One of the things I would like to do first is to make the transition between chapters a little bit smoother. So instead of just boom, there's the next chapter, I'd like to give it possibly a little bit of a fading effect. And this is pretty easy to do with jQuery. So let's go ahead and open up mainscript.js, and right here on line 13 I'm going to click between the semicolon and the parenthesis. Now I'm going to hold the control key and I'm going to do the same thing here on line 23. Now this is something that Sublime allows us to do, to work on multiple lines at the same time. So I'm going to get rid of show and I'm going to type fade in parentheses. So I'm going to use the jQuery fade in method. Hit escape to exit multi-line mode. Hit Control S, and now let's go back and refresh the page. So now when I go to the next chapter, I've got something of a fading effect. It fades in, which is pretty cool. Alright, now I want to add some color to our page. So we're going to take the header here and we're going to turn it into a nice dark raspberry color. So I open up a new tab and I type dark raspberry hex code, and let's see what this is here. Yeah, I kind of like that. So let's use that. 872657. So now let's open up CSS folder, our style sheet. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in the header style. We're going to style the header tag. And we're going to say background hyphen color hashtag 872657. We're going to make the color white. Hit Control S. Let's go back. Let's refresh our page. Not too bad. But I don't want any of the space here on the left and the right. And I'd like my header to go all the way to the top. So the first thing, let's deal with the left and right spacing. Here's how we're going to do that. Let's open up index.html. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my chapters inside of a chapter wrapper class. So let's enter some spaces here. Type div.chapter-wrapper. Hit tab. Hit enter. Now I'm going to be careful to copy all of my chapter content. This will take a minute, but that's okay. Right down to here. Control X. I click inside of my wrapper and I use Control Shift V, and that pastes all of my chapter content into my chapter wrapper. So just to make sure that everything's where it needs to be, there's chapter wrapper. I'm going to reopen this. There's chapter wrapper. There's chapter, so the closing for that is here. The closing for that chapter is here. The closing for this chapter is here. Closing for that chapter is here, and the closing for this chapter is here. So this div right here closes the chapter wrapper. All right. Now let's go back to our styles sheet. Put this in the right order. I like to put it HTML first, then the style sheet, and then the script. So let's go back to our style sheet. Let's change the margins for the HTML and body tag to 0. And now let's add in the chapter wrapper class. Chapter-wrapper. Margin 1 rem top and bottom, 2 rem left and right. What that'll do is that will get rid of the left and right margins on top of my header, but it will also keep the left and right margins on my chapter wrapper. Okay, next thing. Let's go ahead and let's figure out how to remove this space right here. So to remove this space, we're going to turn the positioning of the header into a fixed positioning. So let me show you what a fixed positioning does. So in header, I'm going to say position fixed. I'm going to hit Control S, and now when I refresh the page, look at what happens. Now, look what happens when I scroll down. The header stays with me. It's fixed. But notice also it no longer takes up the full page. And that's okay. That's an easy fix. Now I want to get rid of this gap here. So I go back to my style sheet and I say top 0, save it, and that means my fixed item is now going to go to the top. And so when I scroll, it stays with me. Okay, now let's make it stretch all the way across the screen again. So to do that, I set the left property to 0 and the right property. And what that's going to do is that's going to force my header to stretch all the way across the screen. Now when you make a position fixed or absolute, you actually remove it from the normal document flow. And so there are some consequences to removing something from the normal document flow. Notice that my text now kind of goes underneath my header. How do I fix that? Well, it's pretty easy. Let's go to Chapter Wrapper, and instead of a rem, a top and bottom margin of 1 rem, let's actually change it to 6.5 rems. Make sure you save your style sheet, hit refresh, and now when I scroll to the top, there it is. Go to the next chapter, there it is. So I've got some nice spacing here. Now let's add in a 2 rem padding here so that everything lines up nice. So for my header, I'm going to say, let's see, I'm going to say padding 0 top and bottom, 2 rem left and right. Save it and refresh. And it's looking pretty good, don't you think? Now I want to keep my color theme consistent, so I'm also going to make these buttons the raspberry color. So let's steal this color hex code here. Let's go down to the buttons section and let's paste over that and save. Hit refresh, and now my buttons have that nice raspberry color. Cool. Now notice when I go to the next chapter, it jumps to the top of the page, and yours may not do that because in the previous video I didn't add that functionality back in. So let me show you what to do. Inside of your next and previous on-click methods, add in this line right here, window.scroll to 0, 0. The first 0 represents the X position and the second 0 represents the Y position. And that's considered to be the top left-hand corner of the document. So whenever I go to my next chapter, it automatically scrolls to the top for me, or as far as it can go, because remember we have a 6.5 rem margin here now. Alright, make sure to also save this JavaScript file before you run it. Alright, well this is looking really good. I do notice that the user interface of my website, which we would call the UI. It is a little bit better, but it's still a little bit annoying because when I scroll down and hit next chapter, it takes me to the top. And so to get to the next chapter, I have to scroll all the way down again to hit the button. And while I do like the buttons at the bottom, I don't like having to scroll all the way down just to reach the buttons so that I go to the next chapter. So I'm going to give my users an alternate way of navigating my web page. And that is, I'm going to add in two links up here called previous and next. And that's going to allow my user and myself to navigate the page a little bit more freely. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's go back to our index file. And then inside the header tags after the H1 header, let's add in a div, and let's see. Let's call this CHP for chapter hyphen nav for navigation, BTNS for buttons, pane. So this is my chapter navigation buttons pane. And now I'm going to add in an unordered list, UL, and two list items. And in the first list item, I'm going to type previous. And in the second list item, I'm going to type next. Control S to save. Now when I refresh this, it's not going to look pretty. But I've at least got my previous and next here. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the bullet points. That's pretty easy to do. Let's copy the class here. Let's go over to our styles sheet. And so here, after header, period, and then paste, chapter navigation buttons pane, UL, type in list style type, and select none. And so what that will do is that will disengage. Let's see, it's saying unexpected error. I don't think there's a problem, so let's refresh the page. Yeah, the bullet points disappear, so no problem there. It's saying unexpected error for some reason. Oh well, I don't care. All right, now let's make the list items on the same line. So I don't want previous on top of next. So let's now take this class and copy and then paste it. And now I'm going to add in li. So I'm going to style the list item. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say display inline block. And so what that'll do is that'll make my two elements inline elements like this. Okay, now I don't like the previous and the next being below the header or the name of the book. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make our header tag, we're going to turn it into a flex display. So what I do is I say display flex, and I'm going to say flex direction row, save my work, and that's going to make all the content inside of header stretch. There we go, it's stretched out. But notice that previous and next is still close to the book name, right? I want previous and next to come over here. Now I want to show you the size of the UL element. Or actually, let's show you the size of the chapter navigation buttons pane. So I'm going to say background color, and I'd like you to do this with me. Change the background color to green, refresh, and you can see this is the size. This is as far as it goes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change first my H1 into a flex display. So header H1, and I'm going to say display flex, and I'm going to give it a flex grow property of 1, and I'll explain what that does. Then I'm going to change dot chapter nav buttons pane into a flex display, and I'm going to give it a flex grow property of 1. Save your work. Okay, let's see what happened. Looks pretty good. So what does flex grow 1 even mean? Well, first of all, let me change my background color temporarily for my header, and I'm going to make it good old tomato. So okay, flex grow 1. What flex grow 1 means is that both of my items inside of my flex display are going to grow at the same rate. They're going to grow at the same speed. So both of them end up taking 50% of the space provided. If I changed my chapter navigation buttons pane to have a flex grow of 3 and kept my header 1 at a flex grow of 1, then what would happen is my chapter navigation buttons pane would take up 75% of my flex container, and the header 1 will only take up 25% of my flex container. So let me change that back to 1. And I'm going to keep the green for a moment, but I'll get rid of the tomato. Let's see. The next thing I want to do is I want to make previous and next the same centering with 1 John. So first, let me see what the dimensions of UL are, okay? And so you can use background colors to do this, by the way, to see what the dimensions are. So I'm going to say brown. Okay, so this right here is my UL. Now, UL elements come with default margins and padding, and I don't want that. So we're going to disengage the margins and the padding that come with UL elements. So I'm going to turn the margin to 0 and the padding to 0. I'm going to save my work, hit refresh. So great, that got rid of my padding and margins there. Okay, so how are we going to center the text? Well, believe it or not, we're going to make our U element a flex display, but instead of flexing in the row direction, we're going to flex in the column direction. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say justify content center. Add these 3 properties to your UL element, hit refresh, and bam, they now go here. Alright, well notice now previous and next are kind of on the same line. So what that means is that I want my chapter, not my chapter, my UL, I want my UL to stretch out the entire width. So since UL is contained inside of chapter navigation buttons pane, I'm going to give it a flex grow property of 1. And bam, that stretches it out. Now that doesn't quite fix this previous and this next problem. So okay, well let's see if we can tackle this. Let's see if we can get the fact for this to stretch out. So okay, I've got my LI items set to inline block. Let's take the LI items, and instead of making them inline block, let's go ahead and let's say flex grow 1, I don't know if this will work. That made it even worse. Wow, check that out. That's horrible. All right, let's give them a background color of gold. So they're taking up add the inline block style back. Display inline block. Let's get rid of flex grow 1. Yes, okay, that's a little bit better. So they both take a flex grow of 1, but I've still got this problem of one on top of the other, and I don't like that. So let's get rid of inline block, and let's just say inline. That does not work at all. Okay, I wasn't expecting it to fight me like this. So the answer here is to not give up, which we won't. So now, yes, I think I'm going to cheat. I'm going to say the width is 50%. Well, what do you know? The little swine is still fighting me. Okay, but I'm determined to win. Background color is back to gold. Let's see, how can we fix this little problem? I've got 0 margin, 0 padding for my UL element. Let's turn off, that might be a mistake, but I want to see what happens if I turn off flex grow 1. Alright. Let's make the UL element a width of 100%. That completely didn't work at all. Alright, let's turn the flex grow back to 1. Got the flex grow back to 1. Display inline block. Let's see, display flex. Let's actually get rid of. Alright, I'm going to get rid of these items for a moment. Okay, so that's a little bit better. Alright, let's see if we can make that work for us. So, we've got our UL element. I've gotten rid of all the flex properties on the UL element. And that's given me my inline feature again. So, let's go ahead and let's make, we've already got the chapter navigation buttons pane, and let's make the flex direction column inside the chapter navigation buttons pane. Let's say justify content center. We'll try it. Much better. Okay. So the brown is my UL element and the gold is my LI elements, and we now have centered them nicely. Alright, let's get our previous and our next links over here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our UL element. We're going to say text align right. And that pushes them over here. Now, let me get rid of these exceedingly ugly colors here. Remember, if you want to see the dimensions of a container, you can actually use the background color property to do that, so you can see how big something is on the page. And there we go. Awesome. I want a little bit of a space here between previous and next. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to target the next text. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say chapter nav dot chapter navigation hyphen buttons pane ul li, and I want the word next, so I'm going to tackle what's called the last child, and so that will style the last li element inside of the ul container, which is inside of the chapter navigation buttons pane container. Okay, all I'm going to do is add a margin left of 1 rem. Save, and it pushes it out just a little bit. Well, all right, this is looking pretty good. My header stays with me as I scroll, but I have to add some functionality, don't I? So there are 2 more styles I'm going to add on. Nope, 3 more styles I'm going to add to my previous and next before I give them functionality using JavaScript. So one of the things I want to do is to make it so the user can't highlight the text. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a hover shadow. So when I hover over the 2 words, they give a nice whitish, faded text shadow. And I'm also going to make it so that when I hover over previous and next, my cursor symbol changes into a hand. Well, let's go ahead and do that. So let's style these li elements. Let's say cursor pointer. That will turn it into a hand when I hover over. And let's say user select none. So at this stage, if I save this and then hit refresh, notice my cursor turns into a hand, and no matter how many times I double click, I can't highlight the text. Alright, now let's add in our text shadow. So to do this, we're going to have to tackle what's called the hover attribute. Buttons, pane, ul, li, colon, hover. And so this will style specifically when we're hovering the mouse over the element. And so what I do is I say text shadow, 1 pixel to the right, 1 pixel down. I'm going to blur my shadow with a 10 pixel blur radius, and I want a color of white. Let's see what happens. And I hover over, and check it out. It highlights for me. That's pretty cool. Now the first number, 1 pixel here, that's 1 pixel to the right, and this is 1 pixel down. Well, what if I wanted to go left and up? Then I would say negative 1 pixel, that goes to the left, and negative 1 pixel, that actually goes up. So now when I refresh my page, my shadow appears mostly in the upper left-hand corner instead of the lower right-hand corner. I actually kind of like that, so I'm going to leave that there. Okay, now it's time to finally add functionality to our buttons. And this is going to be beautifully simple. You see, in our JavaScript file, we created these methods, these click methods, on top of the next class and the previous class. And so, to add this functionality, all I have to do is give them their respective class names. So I call this prev, class prev, and I call this class next. And so the code that we created here for the next and the previous button will also work on these links simply because I gave them those class names. So if I refresh the page, here we go. Are you ready? Da 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 da, da 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 da. Check it out. We can now navigate. And the cool thing is this. As I scroll down, I still have my buttons. They make sense from a user interface perspective, those buttons still make sense. You should see something, right, when you get to the bottom of the chapter. So, but I can be anywhere now, and if I want to go to the next chapter or the previous chapter, it doesn't matter where I am. I can navigate to that. All right, so is there anything else I can do? Yes. There is one more thing to the user interface that we can do to make this page even better. Right now, in order to go to chapter 5, I have to press the next button 4 times. What if I've already read chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 and I want to get to chapter 5? Well, it is just a little bit of a pain to have to press that 4 times. What if this was the book of Romans, which has more chapters than 5? I think it has 12, maybe 13, maybe more than that. But I don't want to have to keep pressing this button. I want to be able to have a way to go directly to the chapter I want. Well, we're going to add in even another way to navigate the page right here in the middle between the book name and our previous and next buttons. We're going to add in some boxes that will allow us to navigate between chapters instantaneously. And so we're going to actually use JavaScript to do that for us. Use JavaScript and jQuery. So first thing we're going to do is inside of our HTML document, between the header 1 and our chapter navigation buttons pane, we're going to add in another div, and we're going to call these chapter nav boxes. Chapter nav boxes. Now, I'm not going to add any HTML content here in the file directly. I'm actually going to use JavaScript and jQuery to add the HTML content for me. Let me show you how to do that. Go to your main script file, and then right here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a loop, and we're going to say for let variable I start at 0, that would be chapter 1, where I is less than, so if you need to pause the video at this point just to make sure that it matches this, go ahead and do that. Alright, I'm going to alert hello, and if this works, then it will appear with hello 5 times because there are 5 chapters. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's working. Alright, let's get rid of hello. Now the way that I'm going to add new HTML content is I'm going to use the append function. So chp nav boxes, that's the class, dot append, and then inside I create HTML content. So div class equals boxes, and then close that, and then div. So I'm actually adding in a div class, or a div that has a class of boxes, and it will actually do this 5 different times. 5 different times. Now, I want to see if this works. So there's a couple things I need to do here. Let's go to styles, and let's go ahead and style the boxes class. And right now I'm going to make my boxes pretty ugly. I'm going to say a border of 1 pixel solid white. I'm going to say a background color of tomato. I'm going to say a width of 20 pixels and a height of 20 pixels. And I just want to see if this works. So every time I add in these divs with these boxes class, I should get 5 of them. So let's see if this works. So let's see. It doesn't show it make sure I've got everything. Border 1 pixel, solid white, background color tomato, width 20, height 20. I need a semicolon there. Would that be it? I don't think, I need a dot because it doesn't know that it's a class. Chapter nav boxes, so I need a dot there. Okay, well there they are. And the cool thing is that we generated this HTML content using JavaScript and jQuery. We didn't type it into our HTML page. Now, this part here where it's stacked on top of each other, that's pretty ugly, right? So let's go back to the boxes class in style sheets. And I'm going to change a couple things. I'm going to make the width 1 rem. And the height, I'm going to make half of a rem. And I'm going to get rid of the background color of tomato, but I am going to keep the solid border of white. But I'm also going to add in a border radius of 2 pixels, and that should give it kind of a rounded effect. For display, I'm going to make the display inline block like that. Save your work. And look at that. Now they're all straightened out. All right. Now let's add in some margins. So a margin of, let's say, 1 rem left and right. So 0 rem top and bottom and 1 rem left and right. Okay, 1 rem is way too much. So let's do 0.25. No, you know what? Let's just do pixels. Let's do 5 pixels. That should be good. Yeah, that's a lot better. When I highlight my cursor over them, I want it to be a hand item. Alright, so let's do that. We're going to say cursor pointer. That's pretty good. And what else? I think that these could be a little bit thinner and a little bit wider. A little bit thinner and a little bit wider. So I'm going to let the width be 1.5 rems, but I'm going to let the height be 0.25 rems. Yeah, I like that a little bit better. Well, maybe 0.25 rems is still. Let's do 0.35 rems. Yeah, I like that a lot better. All right, let's go ahead and center this vertically. So the way that we do that is with a flex display. We're going to turn chapter nav boxes. We're going to turn that into a flex display. So right here, I type in period, chapter nav boxes, display, flex, and flex direction is row. Use align items, center, and that will vertically center our content. All right, now since this is chapter 1, I want the first box to be white. I want it to be filled in and the others to remain as they are. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create an active chapter class. And for active chapter, I'm going to make the background color white. Now, in the JavaScript file, after I add in all these HTML items, I want to take the very first element from the boxes array. That's going to be the 0th element. And I'm going to add class active CHP chapter. Now I don't have to have a period here. And the reason why I don't have to have a period is because this is the add class function. So it already knows that what you're typing in is a class. And that's why I don't need the period. And now the first chapter is highlighted. But when I go to the next chapter, this should now move over to the second chapter. Is there any way to handle that? Yes, there is. and we're going to use JavaScript to do that. So okay, when we navigate to the next chapter, we want to be able to change the active chapter. And so inside of our next property here, our next attribute, the click method, we're going to first remove the active chapter class from all the boxes. And so what we do is we say active chapter dot remove class active chapter. Now here we don't need a dot because it's inside the remove class method, so it knows that what you type in is going to be a class. But here jQuery doesn't know what you're typing in is going to be a class or a tag or an ID, so this is why we have to add the dot here. And so this will remove active chapter from every box. And now, since we have the current chapter variable, we can just add this using the index. So I can say $parenthesis, $parenthesis, dot boxes with an index of current chapter. I can add class active chapter. Let's take these two lines of code and let's copy them and paste them down here. And now let's save and refresh. Now, will it change when I press next? Yes, check that out. Okay, pretty good, huh? But the problem is that now I still don't have a way of navigating by just pressing on the box. So that's going to be pretty easy to fix. So let's fix that now. So let's create a function so that when we click on boxes dot on click, we're going to create an anonymous function that will have the functionality for us. Okay, now first thing that has to happen when we click on boxes is we have to remove the active chapter class. So we copy that line 36 there, paste it there. So okay, that's taken care of. Now what we need at this point is we need a way of getting the chapter that we're clicking on. So for example, if I click on box number 1, this is index 0. If I click on box number 2, this is index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4. Let me show you that that works. And I'm going to use the this keyword dot index, and I'm going to save that into my current chapter variable. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to alert current, oops, I don't want the single quotes, I just want the variable name, current chapter. So, okay, let me show you that it gives me the index. I save it, I refresh. Now if I click here, I should get a 4. 4. If I click here, I should get 2. 0. So, here's all we have to do now. We set the current chapter variable to this.index, which means now I can add to that particular box. So actually all I have to do is say this, because whatever I'm clicking on is this particular box. So this.add class active chapter. And then I want to navigate to that page. So what I have to do is I have to hide all the other chapters, just like we've done in our other functions. And then I'm going to simply copy this line of code, these two lines of code right here, and paste them. And so it will now set my current chapter, I will go to that chapter and I'll fade it in. All right, let's see if I've accounted for everything. Hit refresh. Here we go. Are you ready? I'm going to go to chapter 4. Da 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 da. Chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 5. Well, that's rather nice, isn't it? So now I have 3 different ways of navigating my page, and they don't really conflict with each other. These buttons down here make sense, right? Because when we get to the bottom of the page, we should see something, and it makes sense to say, okay, let's go to the next or the previous. But these buttons over here help me because now if I'm somewhere in between and I want to go, yeah, next previous. And then this is very visual. This makes sense. So I think we have done a good job. We've made this little Bible web app even better. And quite frankly, I'm proud of us. Go us. All right. Well, I hope this was a blessing to you today and you learned a few things. God bless you wherever you are today.